You come see me on tour in Rutherford, New Jersey, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Ontario, California, Las Vegas, Davenport, Iowa, Chicago, Illinois. We're doing a live panel video show, special surprise guests on that show, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to Jimmy Dore because they don't want to buy it from a second reseller. I just want to show you this before we let you go because I know you are against war, and you're against certainly genocide, and you're against funding war and the military-industrial complex, which is a point of agreement that we have politically. And so here's a video you'll never see on the news. You'll never see this on MSNBC, CNN, or Fox, or any of the other ones. And it's because the Hasidic Jews see Zionism as anti-Jewish, and they see it as the project of the devil. And so the Zionists have to go after them. So this is, I just want to show you this. Here's the Israeli police going after the Hasidic Jews. Watch this. So that's
they do it, somebody else will do it to you.
You would call that anti-Semitic. I would call that anti-Semitic. That's anti-Semitism. But that's go. How do you respond to that, Dave?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really amazing, like the difference between the image of the Israeli government that you get, from the corporate outlets, and when you actually look into the reality of it. And it's yeah, look, I mean, we've had a big buildup in the militarization of our police here in America, but that's another thing that I think people don't. What was that cop show? Was it Andy Griffin, the cop show?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not saying that's exactly how it was, but the rise of the warrior cop, which is a very good book, by the way. The author's not a fan of mine, but it is a good book. That's a very new thing, and that's a big part of Israeli society as well.
Yeah, after 9/11, we got to get tough like Israel. Then they gave everybody
they militarized our police. Barack Obama was the biggest. He did that. He gave the most military equipment to the local police, and then they all got trained by the IDF and Israel, and now they all act like that. And so now they see. Well, I've talked about this many times. The problem here in Los Angeles is that all the cops live out by Magic Mountain, and then they drive into the city and they look at it like the military did when they were in Iraq, right? They looked at they're an occupying force, and they see the citizen.
Pay them like military.
Go ahead.
Dude, I lived in this town a couple years ago that when I left New York City during lockdowns, me and my wife got this place in this little town in Jersey. It's like this little town, like a beach town. So it's like during the winter, it's kind of dead and there's no one really there. And there was no crime. It was a tiny little town, 15 blocks maybe of town. And they had their own local police department, and they had a tank. And this was a police department that literally, I'm talking about, if you called, they used to do for the few kids who lived in the area, they would do a birthday march, and the cops would come and escort you because they just had nothing to do. If you called up and you were like, you want to come to my kid's birthday party? The cops would be like, absolutely, I want to come. We got nothing going on. And they would roll the tank in back. For some kid turning 7. They just had nothing to do with this shit. And I'm just, it's just one anecdote of a little town in this country, but every little local police department has war gear for absolutely no reason. And then, by the way, in 2020, when riots came, and it was maybe this is the first time that it's ever been justified to have this type of army on your own shores. And they were tearing down the country, and they were like, oh, stand down when they're rioting.
Yeah, of course.
Stand down.
You know
Pepper
what
spray the peaceful protesters and stand down as they're rioting.
So the reason why that was why they stood down during you're talking about the Black Lives Matter riots. The reason why I saw Cornel West give a speech in Harlem, which no one showed up to except a handful of white people. which I warned him about. That's why I bring it up, because I warned him about it and he called me a Trumper. But he said, could you imagine if those were black people on January 6th? And I was like, yeah, nothing would have happened to them, because you know what's happening to those white people? They're being put away for 10, 20, and 30 years. People who weren't even there. Do you know what happened to the people during the Black Lives Matter riots who they burned down police stations in Atlanta? Nothing. So
yeah, and they could say like, oh, well, that's the Capitol Hill. That's different than that. Even though there were government buildings in lots of states that were like ambushed during those riots. But it's just so obvious that it's like, look, you just had these riots and the entire media class sided with them. They said fiery, but mostly peaceful.
I'll never forget that.
That's right.
That was a big mistake.
And then you have January 6th, where the entire media class decided it was 9/11. Like, I mean, so, you know, look, Cornel West, I'm not even saying like, the thing about it is, right, okay, obviously we don't live in like the Jim Crow South or something like that. But I'm not trying to say that there's like nothing about our society that's like a little tougher for black people, or in this area they don't face different challenges or something like that. But when you're so like indoctrinated with this stuff like Cornel West is, the problem is like that has to be your explanation for everything. And so even when that's clearly not the dynamic at work, you're still trying to force this into a race issue. But if you see there's one riot, the entire powerful class all supports them. There's another riot, the entire powerful class all says this is 9/11, they should be treated like terrorists. The idea that your takeaway from that would be, if they were black, it would have been even worse. Like, obviously, race isn't the factor here.
That's right.
The factor is which one was a threat to power and which one was perceived as helpful to power.
But in fact, I go even one step further and say that those Black Lives Matter riots were encouraged by, if not instigated, they were encouraged. And why were they encouraged?
Well, look, think about it like this. Think about it like this, right? What happened to George Floyd was like fucked up, and the video of it is like incredibly like angering and tragic and all that. You got this guy who's tweaked out on drugs, and the cops at every single step escalate the situation, of course, because that's what they do. But it's just so obvious the movie. The guy's having a full-fledged panic attack for a while, if you watch the full video, before they even get him out on the ground. At no point is he like a threat to them. And yet they throw him on the ground, they knee on his neck. Like, I don't care what anybody, I know there's a bunch of right-wingers who are like, there were 2 autopsies done, and one autopsy said that it was the fentanyl and not the this. It's like, whatever, dude. Even in the best case scenario, they found a guy having a panic attack, tweaked out on drugs, decided to violently throw him on the ground, handcuff him, and kneel on his neck. It's horrible, right?
Israeli training is called.
Yeah, right. But shit like this happens all the time. Where there's 300 something million people in this country, there's always incidents like this. And there's no question that the corporate media, after 3 months of lockdowns, picked this story and decided to run it all day on every single channel and constantly talk about it and totally like stoke up and inflame tensions. And there's just no question about it. And then there was all types of money that was put into bailing the people who got arrested at the riots out.
Yeah.
And if you can follow that trail, which is fairly interesting, but a whole bunch of like celebrities and politicians were getting behind this, like raising bail money for the violent ones who had like gotten arrested. It was totally like, and a lot of times people think these things are like 100% controlled or they're organic. But the reality is usually that there's a big mix of a lot of control in it.
A lot of control.
Got a lot of groups,
and
a lot of families.
But the bigger reason why this was because the establishment wanted to create an environment of chaos and fear, and people think that we're about to explode into a civil war, and we got to get rid of that Donald Trump racist, because that's what this is going to, if he gets reelected again, we're going to have a civil war. And that was being stoked by the FBI, the establishment, the media. They were all pushing that, and this was all another, just like Russiagate, which was ubiquitous. Russiagate.
Yeah, well, listen, I'll say this, and I'm not saying like I could prove this or anything for a 100% certainty, but I'm just saying I've read a lot about like color-coded revolutions.
Yeah.
Like that America is like like in Serbia or in Ukraine.
Yeah. Arab Spring.
And Ukraine again. These type of thing. Right. And what happened in America in 2020 maps out almost perfectly.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
To the way they run all of these colored revolutions. It's always the same thing. And it's like they try to foster total media control against one of the candidates and for the other ones. They try to get people out protesting in the street and keep them out as long as they can, just making it always, if there's chaos in the streets, that's inherently bad for who the ruler is.
Yes.
It demonstrates right away the ruler cannot keep order, which is always the number one selling point for a ruler. Why do you submit to my rule? Because I can protect you from the chaos of the world. And so when there's chaos, that hurts the leader. And then the other thing they always try to do is stuff ballots, and they try to, create false flags and all types of these things. So I'm saying between the Governor Whitmer thing, there's your big false flag, October surprise. You had the protests in the streets. You had the media completely in the tank for one of the candidates. And you have an overhaul of the way we do voting in this country. You had this all in 1 year, plus add in lockdowns and all the, clamping down of all these different things. Also add in the mass censorship campaign. This was the year 2020 when everybody who was saying something against the regime was in serious trouble of getting completely censored. And you just put all of that together, and it's like, goddamn, man, that looks exactly like a color-coded revolution. It's all of the same. Now, I'm not saying I can prove it is. It's just, goddamn, what a coincidence.
Is there a debate that it isn't? First of all,
yes,
it's obvious what's happening. Historically, we've been a pyramid scheme, right? And now, for 2030, because we have to reset, they're going to downgrade us to a human centipede scheme. It will not even be as good as a pyramid scheme. You're going to have your mouth stapled on somebody else's ass.
You come see me on tour in Rutherford, New Jersey, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Ontario, California, Las Vegas, Davenport, Iowa, Chicago, Illinois. We're doing a live panel video show, special surprise guests on that show, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to Jimmy Dore because they don't want to buy it from a second reseller.